Have you ever wondered what life would be like if the people you rely on the most slowly drifted away? What if, in your golden years, the very support you counted on began to fade? This is the story of a woman who, after facing the sudden loss of her husband and the gradual detachment of her only son, learned a powerful truth in the end. The one person you can always count on is yourself. Discover how she embraced independence and found strength she never knew she had, reminding us all of the value of self-reliance as we age. I am 60 years old this year and have always lived in the countryside. More than 20 years ago, my husband was working on a construction site when he passed away suddenly due to an accidental work injury. After my husband passed away, the boss of the construction site gave me $42000. He said that all this money was borrowed, and if I thought it was too little and wanted more money, even if he sold everything he had, he couldn't gather more. The boss said that if I was willing to settle privately, I could accept this $42000, sign a consent form, and this matter would be concluded. If I disagreed and wanted to sue for more money, then I wouldn't even get this $42000 because he was already insolvent. Even if I sued, he had no money to compensate me as the construction site wasn't making any money. I was very clear about this. When my husband was working at the construction site, the boss often delayed paying wages, sometimes for several months at a time. If the boss had money, he wouldn't have delayed wages. I was worried that if I didn't accept this $42000, I wouldn't get any compensation. Thinking this way, I accepted the $42000 and signed the consent form with the construction site boss. With my husband's death, the pillar of the family was gone. Previously, we managed to get by relying on my husband's wages from the construction site and my income from farming, but now, without my husband's income, the family's finances quickly fell into difficulties. Although I had $42000 in hand, I didn't dare to spend it. $42,000 wouldn't last long, and if it was all spent, how would I live in the future? The year my husband passed away, our son was already 18 years old. Seeing me constantly frowning, looking helpless, he took the initiative to say that he wanted to go to the city to work and earn money. At that time, our son had just taken the college entrance exam, but his results were very poor, and he didn't even get into a junior college. I thought since my son wasn't good at studying, it might be better for him to go out into society and earn more money. With this thought, I agreed to let him go to the city to work. Before he left, I gave him $2,000 and told him that this money should only be used in times of emergency and not to be touched easily. My son took the $2,000 and went to the city. Not long after, he called me to say that he had found a job in the city working as a car mechanic. He said he could earn $500 a month and that once he mastered the skills, his salary would double. I thought this job was good, and I felt particularly happy inside. I encouraged my son, telling him to learn the skills well in the city and not to give up halfway. But then my son changed his tone, saying he wanted to buy a house and asked me to take out my husband's compensation money to help him buy a house. My son said that the rent for the house he was renting in the city was $150 a month, and after paying the landlord, he had nothing left. Instead of letting the landlord earn the money, it would be better to take out a loan and buy a house of his own. Then, the money used for rent could be used to pay off the mortgage. Once the mortgage was paid off, the house would still be his. Hearing my son's words, I hesitated. I was a rural person with no pension, and my husband was gone. If this money was also gone, how would I support myself in old age? I told my son about my concerns. My son said that my retirement wasn't a problem at all. Once he mastered his skills and his salary doubled, he would bring me to the city and support me for life. My son's words made me overjoyed. The thought of living in the city made my heart blossom with happiness. I immediately transferred the remaining $400 to my son to help him buy a house in the city. My son took out a loan to buy a 3-bedroom apartment. Because there was no money for decoration, he had to live in the unfinished apartment. My son said that it wasn't too late to decorate it once he had saved enough money. Although I was living in the countryside and had no way to earn money, I still worked hard to earn money for my son's house decoration. I raised a lot of chickens and ducks and also raised 2 pigs. At the end of the year, I sold all these chickens, ducks, and pigs, which could at least earn me several $100s. When my son came home for the new year, I handed over the money from selling the chickens, ducks, and pigs to him, telling him to quickly save up enough money to decorate the house so that he wouldn't have to live in the unfinished apartment, which was really inconvenient. My son said that decorating a house was a big deal, and it couldn't be done casually. If the decoration wasn't satisfactory and he wanted to redo it later, it would be a big project. I asked my son how much money was needed to decorate the house satisfactorily. My son said at least $2,000. Hearing that decorating the house would cost $2,000, I immediately lost heart. I thought to myself, when would we ever be able to save up this $2,000? I advised my son, saying that our family's conditions weren't good and we couldn't possibly decorate the house as luxuriously as city folks do. We didn't have that kind of luck. But my son said he didn't believe in luck. He wanted to live a good life, and as long as he had a firm goal, he could definitely achieve his wish. My son didn't listen to my advice, and I had no choice but to work together with him to save money for the house decoration. In the blink of an eye, 3 years passed, and we still hadn't saved up the $2,000 for the decoration. During the new year, my son brought home a girl. He said that this girl was his girlfriend. The girl looked like a rich city girl with an air of nobility about her. The way she looked at me was also full of contempt and disdain, which made me feel very uncomfortable. My son told me that the girl's family was very wealthy, and if they got married, we wouldn't have to worry about the decoration costs. For the girl's family, $2,000 for the decoration was nothing. Although I felt this was unreliable, my son had always been determined, and even if I objected, he wouldn't listen to me, so I could only listen quietly without raising any objections. After a while, my son called to tell me that the house had started being decorated. The decoration costs were all covered by his girlfriend's family. After the house was decorated, my son and his girlfriend got married. On the day of their wedding, although I attended the ceremony, I was placed in the most inconspicuous corner. From beginning to end, no one knew I was the groom's mother. My son knew I was feeling bad, so he comforted me, saying that our family was poor and that I should endure it for now. Once he became successful in the future, he would definitely make me proud. Since my son asked me to endure it, I could only endure it. I had no husband, no money, so I pinned all my hopes for the rest of my life on my son. I didn't dare not listen to him. Although my son was working in the city and his salary had doubled, I still had to rely on myself to live. My son was living a difficult life, and I didn't want to add any extra burden to him. Although the land at home wasn't much, it was enough to feed me. But I still wanted to help my son more, so I often sold eggs, and when I made some money, I sent it to him. I hoped that my son would be happy and that he could live a good life with his wife. But unexpectedly, after my son got married, he gradually distanced himself from me. He no longer called me frequently, and when I called him, he rarely answered. At first, I thought my son was busy, so I didn't think much of it. But later, I found out from others that my daughter-in-law had given birth to a daughter, but I knew nothing about it. I couldn't help but be heartbroken. I immediately called my son, but my daughter-in-law answered. She said that my son was working and that she had something to say to me. My daughter-in-law told me that I shouldn't call my son anymore in the future because he was very busy. When I had time, I should go to the city to take care of my granddaughter. Hearing this, I was shocked. My daughter-in-law had never respected me, and now she even ordered me to take care of my granddaughter. I was not willing to be ordered around by her, but I couldn't refuse directly, so I told her that I was getting older and my health wasn't very good, so I couldn't take care of my granddaughter. But my daughter-in-law said that since I was getting old, I had to rely on my son for support in my old age, so I had to listen to her. When she said this, I was so angry that I hung up the phone. Afterwards, I thought that I couldn't rely on my son for my old age. Since my son and daughter-in-law didn't care about me, I had to plan my own old age. I didn't want to wait until I was too old and unable to take care of myself before making plans. I couldn't rely on others, so I had to rely on myself. After thinking it over, I made a decision. I planned to sell my house in the countryside and buy a small apartment in the city. Although the apartment was small, it was enough for me to live in. I didn't need to rely on my son and daughter-in-law, so I wouldn't be at their mercy. After selling my house in the countryside, I moved to the city and lived in a small apartment. I found a job as a janitor, which wasn't tiring and allowed me to support myself. Since then, I have been living a carefree life. Now that I'm old, I still have no pension or savings, but I don't feel anxious or afraid. I can live my later years without relying on my son, and I'm satisfied with that. I've learned that in this world, the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. Others, even your closest relatives, can let you down, but as long as you have your own strength, you can live a good life in any situation. So don't pin your hopes on others, but instead rely on yourself to support your old age. The second story, living with your children. My parents had 2 sons and always envisioned living with one of us when they grew older. My younger brother even chose his wife based on how well she would get along with our parents, believing this would ensure harmony in a shared household. I witnessed my brother end several relationships because our parents disapproved, often citing reasons like not being traditional enough or lacking domestic skills. Eventually, at the age of 32, my brother married a woman who met all of our parents' expectations. Everyone believed their life together would be harmonious, as initial impressions were positive. However, this harmony was short-lived. Conflicts arose from the generational gap between my parents and my brother's family. My parents valued daily family meals, but my brother and his wife found it difficult to maintain this due to their professional and social commitments. This led to feelings of resentment from my parents, who felt disrespected and neglected. Tensions escalated when my sister-in-law had a baby. My mother, relying on traditional practices, clashed with my sister-in-law's preference for modern, science-based childcare methods. The relationship between my mother and sister-in-law became increasingly strained, resulting in a constant undercurrent of conflict. As the situation worsened, my brother often found himself in the middle, struggling to mediate between his wife and parents. Frustration boiled over into arguments, and eventually my brother and his wife decided to move out. Though not all families experience such conflicts, living together can sometimes lead to misunderstandings and tensions, especially when generational differences come into play. On the other hand, there are families like Mr. Q's where multi-generational living has been a source of joy and comfort. Mr. Q and his wife live with 18 children and grandchildren in a close-knit community. Though they have separate kitchens, every evening they gather for meals, sharing food and conversation, strengthening their bonds. Even family members who live elsewhere consider the parents' home their true refuge, a place to recharge after long, exhausting workdays. Every week, the family holds a gathering to reinforce their connection and share their lives. Mr. Q believes that the greatest reward of living with his children and grandchildren is the peace of mind that comes from seeing them happy and being able to offer daily guidance and support. For many elderly parents, the desire to live with their children stems from the need for emotional closeness and the comfort of family life. Especially as health declines and social circles shrink with age, the fear of loneliness in old age is very real. However, if the children are not genuinely caring, proximity won't necessarily improve the relationship. Some older people prefer to live nearby rather than in the same house, allowing them to maintain independence while staying close enough for regular visits and care. This arrangement can reduce intergenerational conflict while still providing the support and connection that both parents and children need. In the end, the choice of where to live in old age is deeply personal and should be guided by what brings the most peace and happiness to each individual. The third story: embracing senior living in a nursing home. After her husband passed away, Mrs. M made a bold decision. She sold her home and used her pension to move into a private nursing home. This choice shocked her children, who believed it was unusual and even shameful for their mother to live in a nursing home when she had family to care for her. They feared it would reflect poorly on them, as if they were neglecting their duty to care for her in her old age. But Mrs. M calmly explained her reasoning to her children. She knew that at her age, her lifestyle no longer aligned with the busy, modern lives of her children and grandchildren. Living together, she felt, would only bring inconvenience and discomfort to both generations. She would be lonely all day in an empty house while her children were at work, and there were no neighbors her age in their urban apartment complex. In the nursing home, she found companionship with others her age, had her meals prepared for her, and her children could visit whenever they wished. This arrangement allowed both her and her children to live peacefully, knowing they were each in a place where they could thrive. Initially, her children felt guilty about her decision, but as they saw how happy and healthy she was in the nursing home, their worries faded. During holidays, Mrs. M would spend a few weeks with her family before returning to the nursing home. Whenever she visited friends still living with their children, she would share her positive experiences and even encourage them to consider the same path. Similarly, Mr. V, at 70 years old, chose to use his pension to live in a nursing home rather than follow his son to the city. His only son had moved to the city for work, married, and started a family of his own. After his wife passed away, Mr. V planned to live alone in his rural home, but his children insisted he move to the city with them. Reluctantly, he agreed, but after nearly 2 years, he felt as if he were living in a gilded cage. His days were spent in front of the TV with no social interactions and no freedom to live as he wished. Suffering from Parkinson's disease, Mr. V one day saw a television program about nursing homes and decided to explore the option online. He realized that this could be the right environment for him, providing the care and social interaction he craved. He asked his children to let him try living in a nursing home for a few months. Though initially hesitant, they agreed. To everyone's surprise, Mr. V's health improved as he thrived in the company of others and received daily care. He then decided to permanently move into the nursing home, using his military pension to cover the costs. His children were relieved, knowing he was happy and well cared for, without the daily burden of cooking or managing his care. There was a time when sending elderly parents to a nursing home was seen as abandoning them, as a betrayal of family values. However, the reality is changing. More and more seniors are choosing to live in nursing homes. Some are alone, some have children who are too busy to provide the care they need, and some simply seek a peaceful place to enjoy their golden years. What's most important is that they are content and happy with their decision. Dear friends, deciding where to spend your later years is a deeply personal choice that varies with each family and situation. Whether you choose to live with your children or independently, the essence of senior living lies in joy, health, and maintaining the values that define your family. Parents can live together or separately, depending on what suits them best. It's not necessary to impose the traditional expectation that children must care for their aging parents at home. Sometimes, parents might find true peace and comfort in a different setting. Senior life is not about dependence on your children, but about finding peace, joy, and satisfaction in every day. Whether you choose to live with your children, alone, or in a nursing home, the most important thing is that each senior lives the life they desire, holding on to their family values and personal dignity. Remember, aging is not the end, but a new chapter filled with meaning, where you can savor every moment with true contentment and joy. Take control of your journey and live a senior life that is memorable and fulfilling. Modern parents and the choice of independent living. Mr. V and Miss N are parents of 2 sons, yet they surprised many when they chose not to live with either of them. Despite both sons residing and working in Hanoi, when it came time for each to marry, Mr. V and Mrs. N gently encouraged them to establish their own households. Miss N, having once been a daughter-in-law herself, understood all too well the challenges of living under one roof with in-laws. This experience shaped their belief that once a son gets married, he should have his own home. 3 years ago, when their younger son got married but hadn't yet saved enough to buy his own place, he asked to stay with his parents temporarily. Mrs. N agreed, but with a condition: they could only stay for 3 months. If they hadn't purchased a house by then, they needed to find a rental. It's not about being harsh, Mrs. N explained, but about thinking ahead for their sake. Different generations have different lifestyles, and living together for too long can inevitably lead to conflict. Now, their elder son lives about 10 kilometers away, convenient for his daily commute, while the younger one purchased an apartment right next to his parents' home. On weekends, the entire family gathers at Mr. V and Mrs. N's house for meals, laughter, and time together. When asked if they might consider moving in with their children as they grow older, Mrs. N confidently responded, "We plan to sell this 4-story house and use half the money to buy a smaller apartment, something easier to manage. The rest will go toward our retirement. If we become too frail, we'll hire help or consider a senior living community. But we won't burden our children." Similarly, Miss L has chosen to live independently, apart from her sons. Her 2 adult sons, both married, often urge her to move in with them, leaving behind the large family home she lives in alone. Yet Miss L remains steadfast. Living in the countryside, she says, "I have friends to socialize with, and I enjoy the freedom. In the city, it's just doors opening and closing, day after day, with little interaction." When she visits her sons in the city, she notices the routine: they leave in the morning, return late at night, and bury themselves in their computers or phones. Their only interaction with her is a quick greeting when leaving and returning home. City life, with its constant rush and fear of strangers, doesn't suit her. "Let them live their lives as they wish," she says, "while I continue to enjoy the village lifestyle. If I fall ill, I know they won't be able to care for me around the clock. My caregiver will be someone I hire, and that's fine with me. My sons can visit occasionally, and that's enough." These stories reflect a growing trend. The modern world is gradually moving away from the traditional multi-generational family model. Instead, more and more seniors are choosing to take charge of their own lives in their later years, rather than relying on their children. They prefer to live independently or close by, but not under the same roof. These parents have prepared themselves for old age, deciding early on to live separately as soon as their children start their own families. They offer support when needed, but otherwise they maintain control over their own lives, eating, traveling, socializing, and even choosing senior living communities if it suits them. And this, they believe, ensures a more fulfilling and harmonious life for everyone involved.
If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.